Good morning and welcome to the 2025 season preview for the Detroit Tigers. My name is Michael here at the Upside Sports Network. Appreciate you guys taking the time and joining us. We continue our series for the 2025 season preview as we go through each team, breaking down how their rotation looks, how their lineup is going, what their prospect system looks like, how their payroll is set up, and what options they have to improve during the year, and ultimately how they did this offseason and where they'll finish the 2025 season. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you are new here to the Upside, as we have every single team. We're going to have all the teams done by the end of the day. If we already have your team out there, go ahead and check out our channel. We're going to be finishing up the last few teams that we have not done yet today, including the Texas Rangers tonight at 7 o'clock. So be sure to join us for that one. Sure to be a very special episode here at the Upside. Without further ado, let's get to the 2025 season preview for the Detroit Tigers. Now, last year, Detroit really had a nice, surprising season, according to some. Now, going into the year last year, there was some expectation that they would be a better team, but nobody had them penciled in as a wild card team or a division winner. This was still a team that had struggled for the last several years now to really get any positive things going on the ground. Now, as far as Detroit goes, of course, they had an incredible season from Screwball and so forth, and they were able to get that final wild card spot and finish the season last year 86-76. What is ahead for the Detroit Tigers? Well, let's take a look. This offseason was fairly active for them. They were rumored to bring in Alex Bregman. They were in on several pitchers, but looking at their lineup for this year, Parker Meadows figures to be their leadoff hitter. Riley Green, hopefully he can stay healthy out there in left. They're going to probably utilize him a little bit in center as well, I'd imagine. Gleyber Torres is your second baseman, the big addition for the offense anyway. There was, of course, like I just mentioned, the possibility of them bringing in an Alex Bregman, but ultimately that didn't happen. But Gleyber Torres, a very good offensive piece. Hopefully the one-year contract will work out best for both sides. I think Gleyber Torres was wanting a bigger long-term deal once he got to free agency. It was very clear he wasn't going to get that. And so if he was going to get a multi-year deal, it's going to be a low-cost deal. So he took the higher AAV and decided to go to Detroit. He'll be utilized quite a bit here. I think he's going to be utilized in kind of that Alex Bregman role that they envision for him. They'll probably use him primarily at second base, but he does have positional versatility. So don't forget about that one. DH, Kerry Carpenter, had a great year last year. Colt Keith, another great rookie campaign. Ultimately going to be sliding over to first base. Spencer Torkelson is going to be told to work on things down in the minors this year, and hopefully he can reestablish his value he once had. But they're hoping the offensive production he had last year slides over to first base and he continues to grow. When you're trying to learn a new position, though, I'm not sure how much growing you're going to do offensively because you're trying to do something a little bit different defensively. Takes a lot of power, mental power to try to get to those levels. So we'll see if he does. Right field, they'll have Perez. Of course, Jace Young, the guy that is the brother of Rangers third baseman Josh Young, will be their third baseman this year. I imagine he'll get a nice chance to solidify that role. You'll notice he has barely any service time so far. So this is the reason they were trying to bring in Alex Bregman. They wanted somebody with a little bit more experience. Not that they don't think Jace Young could do it or eventually could do it, is that they would rather have somebody that they trust in that spot. You can see they tried to have a little bit of a veteran influence by bringing in Torres into this lineup. That had been the same thought process here for Alex Bregman. Jace Young, they probably would have flexed out to the outfield, maybe for a Perez spot, or maybe put Young over there in left and put Green over there in right. That would have been a possibility as well. Overall, They have Jake Rogers, of course, as their catcher, and Trey Sweeney as their shortstop. They're going to be using in a platoon because their biggest free agent addition in years, Javi Baez, hasn't exactly been worth the money. We'll show you guys the payroll for the Tigers here in just a minute as to why they were so unwilling to go the multi-year contract with Alex Bregman, or a long-term deal, that is, at the numbers he was looking for. Also, you look at the past history of this team with the bad contracts that they signed for Jordan Zimmerman, how the contract aged for Miguel Cabrera. They were a little hesitant to do things along those lines. So they are a very good team, but it's going to be led primarily with a lot of their young talent coming through, of course, like we just saw there in the lineup with Keith Young. Green is still only 24 years old. Parker Meadows is only 25. A lot of youth in this lineup, and they're going to be counting on a lot of that to really come through offensively. But the pitching staff is where they're really going to have their bread butter, or their bread butter there. As far as the bench, Dylan Dingler looks to be their backup catcher. Javi Baez, in a platoon role, making all that money, will be in their bench kind of platoon situation at shortstop. Hopefully he can stop striking out so much, maybe being pushed to the bench this year, at least a little bit more than he has in the past, will kind of spark a fire under him. You got to hope for something at this point on that deal, I suppose. I love Andy Ibanez, former Texas Rangers farmhand. Really good offensive player, struggles at times defensively, but he's going to be more of a platoon guy, it sounds like, at DH because of that bat. And then Zach McKinstry gives you some flexibility in the outfield. Overall, as far as the lineup where you're looking for your production, Riley Green, of course, he does play a good defensive outfield as around a 4 WAR. Gleyber Torres primarily for the offense, around a 3 WAR, and then everybody else they're kind of have a ho-hum expectations for. Offensively, though, 130 weighted runs created plus for Riley Green tells you that's where you're expecting a lot of production. Same thing for Kerry Carpenter at 121, and then a couple of below average guys in Rogers, Sweeney, and Perez to at least start the year. Now, of course, Jace Young, barely any MLB experience. We'll see how his first real test in the majors goes. For the rotation, of course, you have Tarek Skubal, probably the best starter in the American League for my money last year. We'll see if he can replicate that performance, and if the Tigers are still in contention at the All-Star break, if they want to hold on to him, try to get an extension done, or if they're going to trade him. There were some rumblings that they could have traded him last year. I think that those rumors will kick up once again if they are struggling at the All-Star break. That's one name to keep an eye on. Jack Flaherty returns to the Detroit Tigers after being traded away last year. Ultimately got him a couple of prospects, and now they get the benefit of having him on a little bit longer term of a deal. Good on them, and they got him at a price that is fairly reasonable. Reese Olson is their number 3, Casey Mize the number 4, and Jackson Jobe number 5. This rotation has seen some veterans that could have a chance to make the opening day roster. This is what Fangraphs is projecting. I will say they'll probably have a revolving door for that 4th, 5th role, but Jackson Jobe will be given every opportunity to solidify himself as a major league starter this year. Casey Mize was really hit hard last year. I would expect him to be one of the first guys that is bounced out of this rotation. Skubal, they have around a 5.5 WAR. I would expect even higher out of a Cy Young level candidate. Jack Flaherty around 2.5. That's fairly reasonable for what I would expect. And then Jackson Jobe, they're expecting some struggles for him, and he's the number 5 prospect in the game. I do think he'll face his first few struggles anyway. But I will say he's going to have a significantly better year than what Fangraphs is projecting. I will say that. I think he'll be their number 3 by the time June rolls around, as far as this rotation goes. As far as the WAR, we just talked about Skubal and Flaherty, but they are expecting a decent season out of Reese Olson as well. 3 of the pitchers out of the 5 they're projecting a sub-4 ERA. Not bad, but I do think Jackson Jobe is going to be a lot better than what Fangraphs has. Expect a nice season out of him. For their bullpen, this is where they were trying to get some improvements with Ryan Presley, Kirby Yates, other names that they're trying to bring in as far as a closer. Even Kenley Jansen. That did not happen. Finnegan ultimately didn't happen either. And so it looks like they'll be going with a kind of a closer by committee, if you will. Jason Foley, Bo Brisky, Tyler Holton as well. Then you get some veterans here. Tommy Canley in the bullpen, Will Vest, Andrew Chafin is on a non-roster or minor league deal. I expect him to be on the big league roster. John Brabia is also here, and Kenta Maeda, who I expect to take some starts this year, but also has the flexibility to be a long reliever out of the bullpen. We saw him do that in his previous 2 stops as well with the Dodgers and the Twins. So I'd expect him to be that guy that if Casey Mize gets hit really hard, he could immediately flip into that rotation and option Casey Mize down. Mize does have 3 options left, so they can utilize those options if he does start to get pretty hard. But overall, they do have a couple of guys that are going to start the season on the injured list. Alex Cobb, one of their free agent signings, had offseason hip surgery a couple of years ago. Only pitched a few innings last year, but he was very good in those innings. Signed a 1-year deal, $15 million with the Detroit Tigers, and now has an issue in the other hip. Now, there are not indications that he'll miss the entirety of the season. I will say that. But it isn't ruled out either. I would say that this is a hip issue for a guy that's known to have hip issues, that's kept him out for over a year in the past. He could be out for the season for them, so I'm not expecting a lot of production out of him. Right now, they're calling it the hip inflammation. Again, I'm still expecting him to miss some significant time this year, if not the entirety of the season. I'm not sure how many innings you're going to get out of him. Matt Vierling had a strained rotator cuff recently. I'm expecting him to miss some time early in the year. We'll see when they get him back. Overall, I do think this is a good team, going to be led by their pitching staff primarily, and they're going to have to get some great performances out of this rotation to do as well as they did last year. But I want to welcome in those of you who are in our chat. Welcome in Ethan, Holly, Ocean View, Nando. Appreciate you joining us once again. The Tigers are the premium team in the AL Central. I would say they're a very good team. I don't think any team in the AL Central is necessarily running away with it. I don't think there's a super team in this mix. I will say the Royals are very competitive. I would say the Guardians are fairly competitive. I'd say the Twins are at least a decent team on paper, but we'll see if they even have this team together at the trade deadline. And the Detroit Tigers, like I said, are going to be led by this pitching staff and so much young talent. They're going to have those guys really come through for them. And I think they'll have some surprises. I think Jackson Jobe could really be a great pitcher this year, possibly an AL Rookie of the Year candidate from the pitching side, which is hard to do. Usually pitchers kind of get shoved to the side for a position player who's able to do it every single day in the lineup. But I would say that Jobe has a really good chance of getting that AL Rookie of the Year spot just because of pure talent. I think he is that good of a pitcher. We'll dig into the prospect that Detroit has coming from the minors here in just a moment, but they have a bright future ahead of them. The question is what they decide to do financially going forward. You'll look at I was looking at their payrolls from years past, and they got up to like 172, 168, 173, and that was around 2013, 2015 range. That was the height of their payroll. Now, as far as this team goes, this is not a team that is traditionally at the very top spending. They're not going to be the Dodgers. They're not going to be the Yankees. But they could certainly add some payroll to this team. This is a team that does have some flexibility going forward because of those youth on their roster. But they also have been burned by some bad contracts. So when we look at the payroll of this club, last year 104, they jumped that payroll up this year to 144. They certainly see themselves as a contending team, at least in the AL Central. And I would agree with them. But also, look at their finances here. Sure, the Javi Baez deal looks terrible, but it's going down each year. 25 this year, 24 the next, 24 the year after, and then a free agent in 28. Can't wait for that deal to be over fast enough if you're a Detroit Tigers fan. Flaherty, signed to 25 this year, has a player option for 10 the next year. As far as Alex Cobb, $15 million, then a free agent. Torres, $15 million, then a free agent. Maeda, 10, and then a free agent. Canely, 7.5, and a free agent. They have a lot of money coming off the books next year. So they could be a player in free agency once again. But what it does tell me is they have the flexibility right now to add at the deadline. Say there's a guy that they see as a real difference maker for them at the deadline. Say Rafi Devers and Alex Bregman don't work out in Boston. For whatever reason, they have to move one of those guys. Whichever one Boston decides to trade, the Tigers could easily soak up one of those deals and still have room to go in the future. Now, of course, the long-term contracts do scare the hell out of the Detroit Tigers, and rightfully so, but they still have the flexibility to add some payroll if they wanted to. Again, look at the guys that are going to be free agents. They're going to have what? That's 25, 40, 60, 70, 75 million coming off the books here. That's a lot of money that they'll be able to spend in free agency next year. They will be active in next year's free agency. Then, of course, you get your arbitration guys. Those guys, of course, will have their salaries go up over the next couple of years. But for luxury tax purposes, their payroll sits at 158 right now. Next year, it drops all the way down to 49. Now, with the options being picked up and with the arbitration guys, expect that number to go up to like $90-ish million as far as a luxury tax payroll commitment. And then they could still have roughly $60 million just to get back to where they were in spending this year. And I think they'll add even more payroll as those young players start to reach the major leagues, as they fill in the spots around the lineup that they need. For instance, they really could use a closer right now. David Robertson's sitting out there. He's done it before, but is probably more of a setup guy in my opinion. But maybe they go that direction. He is still out there on the free agent market, and they have a significant hole out there in the bullpen. Maybe they like their arms that they have back there. If that's the case, so be it. But I'd rather have an arm like a David Robertson anyway, who is nothing but the model of consistency at the major league level. And in bullpens, that's unheard of. Usually you see a guy have a great year followed by a stinker, maybe a decent year followed by another great year. And that's just how bullpens go. It's not necessarily any indictment on the pitcher. It's just really hard to be a guy that comes in a fireman situation and solve problems the way they do. It's a hard job, but they're paid really well to do so for the most part. And some of those guys rise above the others. And of course, the elite ones we all remember, the closers like Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, Billy Wagner, all those greats that were able to do it in the ninth inning role. And now we're seeing a lot of the closers right now are not quite to that level. And so we're seeing a lot of variance in performance. Not even the top closers in the game have been consistent from year to year. Craig Kimbrell is no longer top of the mountain. Jensen is no longer top of the mountain. Clase was the top of the mountain last year, but he's had his struggles as well. So, for bullpens, they're quite mercurial. I would like to get somebody who's the model of consistency back there in David Robertson in a position that is absolutely devoid of consistency across the board for the entire sport. So I would like to see Detroit go out there and add a bullpen piece like that, and then kind of see how good of a team they have going into the 2025 season. I'll give you my prediction here in just a moment, but overall I think Detroit has a solid team from top to bottom. They're relying a lot on the youth in this lineup, and it's going to have to come through in order for them to be real competitors for a postseason spot, for a wild card spot, or even for the division crown. All right. As far as the prospects, like I said, they have a lot of youth coming. Jackson Jobe is just one of them in the top 5 as far as Major League Baseball's top prospects. Max Clark is still there. Then they have Kevin McGonglier. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering it. Bryce Rayner, Theron Lorenzo, Josue Briseño. They have some really good options, but again, look at all those guys besides Jackson Jobe. A-ball, rookie ball, A-ball. They have a lot of young talent coming, so it's probably a year away from really having a chance to get to the big league level. Max Clark specifically, I want to look at his numbers if it pop up here for us. Last year, did get to the high A level. He's probably going to be at double A for the most part, but you can see how they have a lot to work with here. Former number 3 pick in the entire draft in 2023. He's still only 20 years old, so he's finally starting to reach some of his potential, and I imagine they'll push him for greater heights this year. But like I said, a lot of young talent coming. Jobe is the only one that's MLB ready, and then they got a lot of good guys coming that'll kind of supplement this roster in a year. But that's kind of why they go the Gleyber Torres route on a 1-year deal, to where they still have the flexibility if they need to have a roster spot available. One of these guys could earn a spot out of camp in 26, 27, somewhere in there. All right. Overall, this roster is pretty solid. I would say that they really could have used another impact bat like an Alex Bregman, and that to me is a miss this offseason. I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I would call it a miss. That they didn't do enough offensively to solidify this lineup, especially when you have 3 below average hitters in this lineup in Perez, Rogers, and Sweeney, and then even on your bench, not one of those guys has a weighted runs created plus of 100, which by the way is league average. Tells me that they might need to get some guys on minor league deals and kind of see if they can get some nice production out of those guys. As far as wins of the offseason, getting the 1-year deal for Gleyber Torres, I thought that one was a nice one there. And then on the pitching side, the deal for Jack Flaherty, I was surprised other teams didn't offer more or a longer-term deal. And to get Jack Flaherty on the contract that they did, just good work for them. Hopefully things work out the best for Detroit this year as far as those contracts, and they are willing to spend a little bit more money on a longer-term deal going forward, because again, they've been burned by 3 bad ones in a row. I think they're due for a good one, so hopefully they make the right decision to see who they want to go with. As far as what other pieces they have in the minor leagues that might be a factor for them, catcher, some names that might ring out for you: Thomas Nitto, Brian Serven, names that you might have seen before. Maybe they get a spot there. Spencer Torkelson, I think, is going to get all the time that he needs in the minors to get that bat right, but he will be called up and he will be counted on to be a producer for them at some point during the year. They're expecting him to be up at the major league level for probably about a third of the year and get around 200 at bats. That sounds about right. But again, it's about getting that bat right. And if it doesn't come around, it could be a long season there. Ethan, Tavares for Casey Mize. We could go into the holes, part of this for the Tigers here in just a moment. But for the Rangers, I don't want any part of Casey Mize. I get that he might be the one pitcher that's probably most available because he was hit so hard last year. But his numbers just look so rough that even if you're looking for innings, I think you'd rather go with some of the guys that you already have in-house in Texas. Adrian Hauser, one of the names they signed to a minor league deal, I would probably use rather than going the Casey Mize route. But I do get the thought process there that maybe you give him a bat like a Tavares. I say a bat. He would be an improvement over the guys that are below average anyway, in my opinion. I think Tavares still has that ability in him. How much can you really expect out of him, though, is something that is still up for debate. As far as the trade, though, I wouldn't do that if I was Texas. If I was the Tigers, I think there's better options for me to go after anyway. And getting off of the Mize deal, I think, would be a decent option for them as well. First base, we already did Spencer Torkelson. Second base, Hao-Yu Lee, non-roster invitee. Maybe he gets some time at the big league level as an injury replacement. Nobody at third that sticks out. Shortstop, nobody really. Outfield, Akil Baddoo is injured as a non-roster invitee. Jahmai Jones, non-roster invitee, might be a player for them at some point this year. Nobody else really sticks out. On the pitching side, Matt Manning, Ty Madden, a couple of guys that we've seen before. Former top prospect for the Minnesota Twins, Jordan Blazevic. I think they misspelled it here on Fangraphs, actually. I think it is Blazevic. For the Detroit Tigers. Hopefully he can be a nice piece for them, give them some depth. And then on the relief pitching side, see if any names kind of pop out to us. Chase Lee, Ricky Vanesco, Gage, a couple of guys that kind of stick out. Not too bad. Injuries, nobody here in the minors at least. But they do have a couple of names that they might be able to call up at some point. Welcome in, Master Pinman. Appreciate you joining us. We're doing the Detroit Tigers 2025 season preview. We'll follow this one up with the Miami Marlins immediately following, so be sure to stick around. We're going to finish up the entire league today. So if we haven't done your favorite team yet, check out our channel. You'll see what teams we've already done. We're going to finish off the rest of them today, concluding with the Texas Rangers at 7 o'clock, so be sure to join us for that one as well. As far as mistakes of the offseason, like I said, the miss for me is them not adding another bat. As far as a mistake, I don't think they really put their foot in one. I'll put it that way. I don't think they made a mistake this offseason. In my opinion, I still think they should have gone out and added another bat like an Alex Bregman and shaken off the bad contracts that they've had in years past. But understandably, it's not my money. I'm not the one that has to spend it. And I can understand the hesitation from ownership and from the front office of giving another bad long-term deal and getting stuck with it like they have been the last three. Javi Baez, Jordan Zimmerman, and for Miguel Cabrera. But ultimately, this is a good young team with good young talent already on the big league roster with another wave of young talent coming. And just to kind of show the prospect list again, that's 6 guys in the MLB Top 100 for this season. They have a bevy of young talent coming that's about a year or so away. They need to have invested right now because now's the time where their lineup is going to be really cheap both now and in a couple years. So they have a little bit of a window here. And again, the biggest payroll they ever really got to was around 173, 178. That was about 10, 15 years ago. They can afford to add some more payroll. Right now, they're sitting at 144, luxury tax commitments at around 158. They can stand to add more payroll because, again, they're going to be dropping quite a bit of salary this offseason, a lot of one-year deals that are going to be falling off their books. They will have the ability to add some significant payroll, some significant talent in free agency next year, and maybe they just like the free agent class next year a little bit better. That may very well be the case, but when we get to this point next year, I don't want to be sitting here talking about how they shoulda, coulda, and woulda spent more money, but instead they chose to go the one-year option route because they were afraid to give a long-term deal. I do not want to do that for a second straight offseason for them, so I'll give them a pass this year as far as them not spending that money. But next year, they better start spending some of that money because this is a good contending team that has a chance to win the division and has a very good chance to win a wild card, as evidenced by their ability to do so just this past season. All right, holes on this roster, impact bat. So let's go ahead and see where we can go to add an impact bat. We'll go to the trade simulator. They seem to like one-year deals, so You guys can already guess where I'm going to go for this one if we're looking for a one-year deal. We're going to do the Tigers, of course, and the team that we've been trading with quite a bit, the San Diego Padres. Now, San Diego, the player that I'm thinking of here, let me get to the major side of things here first, is Luis Arraez. I think he'd be a great option at the top of this lineup. Just look at this lineup. Parker Meadows at the one spot here. Say you put Luis Arraez at the leadoff spot. You put Parker Meadows down at, say, the sixth spot in that lineup. That's a much deeper lineup with that slight change there. And, by the way, it doesn't exactly screw them over from a salary perspective. He's making $14 million. But again, they still had the ability to add some significant payroll this offseason and chose not to do the long-term deal. Well, how about this, Detroit? You get a short-term deal. If you like him, then sign him to a longer-term deal. If it doesn't work, so be it. Now, as far as where he would play, for me, I think Torres could easily handle third base. He came up as a shortstop. I think he has the versatility to play third base if necessary. You could always put him at DH. You could always move one of your corner outfielders. But I think wherever you put him in the lineup, just having him there, having him kind of raise the floor of this team and give you a little bit better production is the way to go. And it's not going to cost you a whole lot. About a $5 million value here. So Detroit, let's go over to them. Surplus value around $5 million. Their entire first page is probably a little bit too rich. So let's go on to page 2 here. Like I said, they got a lot of young talent coming. They could go with a young second base option there. And I would probably do that if I were the Padres. I might want a little somebody else in return as well, just to kind of give somebody that could be on the Major League roster. But that's pretty good value. I'm not sure if the Padres would do it straight up for a prospect, but they'd be getting a good one there. Let's go a little bit cheaper, though, and say they wanted to get a Major League player back in return. So say they went with a guy like Matt Manning, some depth in their starting pitching. They do have a lot of guys coming up on deals. And then say they go with another young player, a Max Anderson. Not as good as a player as Yahoo Lee, or How Yu Lee. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but best efforts. And there you get a starting pitcher you could easily plug in your long relief role in the bullpen, especially if you move on for Robert Suarez. Now you have a spot in your bullpen. You move back Jason Adam into the closer role, and now you have space for Manning on the active roster. Validate the trade and post it. There you go, Detroit. Now you got yourself another bat for your lineup. Low-cost option there for you, and on a short-term deal that they seem to really like. Let's do another trade for Detroit to get them another bat. Let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's go a little bit more longer term. So we're Detroit. We want somebody with some skill set here. Maybe an outfielder type could be a fit. Third base could be a type because I think Jace Young anyway, could be flexed to the outfield if necessary. Second base would be an option as well. First base, I wouldn't rule it out, especially with Colt Keith having to learn a new position. Safe to say he hasn't solidified that spot yet and made it his own, but we'll see. Other spots that you could look for some production, maybe go to the Cardinals if you really want to go for another bat on a short-term deal. Nolan Arenado is there. He would have to waive his no trade to go there, and I don't think he would do that, but that would be an option. Teams that could be trading away some hitters, Nationals maybe at the deadline this year. Blue Jays, of course, at the deadline. It'd be tough to trade within the division with those three teams. I don't think that'll happen. Royals, Twins, or White Sox. White Sox, though, if they could offload that Benintendi contract, they would love to be able to do so. They ain't taking on a long-term bad deal, though. Let's see here. Yankees, maybe Candelario from the Reds. Maybe you take on that bad deal and get the Reds to eat a little bit of that deal. Maybe that'd give you a little bit of a juice, but I would prefer something better than that. We're talking an impact bat, so where could you go to get one? Teams at this point are just trying to figure out their active rosters more than anything else. They aren't going to shake up the rosters too big. Let's say at the deadline the Blue Jays go to sell, right? That's my expectation, is that I don't expect them to be overly competitive this year. So who could they offload? Vladimir Guerrero is one of the most common names that's tossed about, but let's say they go a different direction here. We've done a lot of Vladdy trades. What could work here? Anthony Santander with signed long-term, I don't think they would do that. I think they'd prefer to keep their powder dry. Dalton Varsho could be an option. In fact, I wouldn't mind that one for Detroit. Put him out there and right. kind of like that one. So let's say Detroit reaches out and gets Dalton Varsho. Detroit would have to give up something in the $8 million range as far as value. I don't think you're giving up one of your top 100 guys, but you do have an older catcher. You do have Alejandro Kirk, who's probably going to be flexed to DH role permanently. So say you include Dylan Dingler in this deal. That gets you already to pretty much even value. I think they would want one other piece, though, to kind of make it interesting for them. So we're going to go all the way down to page 3 and just get a low-cost prospect here. Say they do another catcher prospect. Not too bad. If I'm Toronto, would I do this deal? I'd have to have certainty as far as what the future held for Alejandro Kirk. For me, because I'm getting a young catcher in addition to this, I probably would do it if I'm Toronto. It'd be a hard sell for me to come to that decision, though. So I would say that there would be a possibility that they would go with a different piece as far as a headliner than Dingler. I mean, they gave up a pretty penny in order to bring in Dalton Varsho. They gave up their catcher of the future in Gabriel Moreno, and this would be one way to recapture some of that youth at that position there. Varsho's only got a couple years left, including this season, so not too bad to capitalize on the value that he has, especially if the bat doesn't come around this season. Overall, would I do the trade for Detroit? I would probably do it. I think that would give them a nice upgrade in the outfield without being a huge cost, and it doesn't preclude them from making any other moves in the offseason. Say they get to the offseason and Kyle Tucker says, hey, I want to be a member of the Detroit Tigers. Well, so be it. Come on down, Kyle Tucker. We'll have the financial resources available because we didn't soak him up in this trade. And just because we brought in Dalton Varsho here doesn't mean we can't move him out to a different outfield spot or trade him in the offseason as well. So I like what this trade would do for both sides. Validate the trade, post it. Not too bad of a deal overall. This, again, would be a deal probably at the trade deadline more than anything else. Master Vinman, their number 2 prospect, just has a perfect baseball name, Max Clark. Yes, he does. Reminds me a lot of the Will Clark, the Rangers first base from years and years and years ago. I believe he played for the Giants, and I want to say the Cubs for a period of time as well. Maybe even Baltimore, but he was one of my favorite players growing up. He was quite a first baseman anyway. All right. As far as the rest of this team, maybe they could add another closer, type of pitcher to their bullpen. But again, I think I would prefer to go the free agency route for a Robertson type to kind of solve that issue. I think they're a team that has a little bit of payroll flexibility to where they can still add a David Robertson to that bullpen mix, and they still are making adjustments to that bullpen. They just signed Andrew Chafin, a guy who they have extensive experience with, to a minor league deal. I expect him to make this roster out of spring training as well. But where will they finish in 2025? Well, let's look where they finished in 2024. Last year they finished 86 and 76. Overall, a good ball club. Not a great ball club. They need more talent on the offensive side. They need more production out of the offensive side. They did make the addition of Gleyber Torres, and I love them bringing back Jack Flaherty. I would say this is a team that's in very similar position to where they were last year. If you guys already watched a couple of the other videos that we made anyway, we showed you that the Guardians, I don't expect them to win the division. Twins, I have them missing the playoffs. I don't think anybody believes that the White Sox are going to win the division. So that leaves the Royals and Tigers. Which team do I think wins the division? This is a tough one for me, but I'm going to say the Royals, just by a nose, win the division over the Detroit Tigers. And I'm going to say Detroit finishes the season very similar spot to where they did last year. So I'm going to say they win 87 games with the roster that they have. Is it good enough for the postseason? Well, let's look at it. The Yankees I have winning the AL East. Boston I have taken up one of those wild card spots. I do believe the Orioles are going to be good enough to get one of those wild card spots, especially if they add a starting pitcher to their mix. I think they'll win enough games. So you get 2 wild cards out of the AL East. AL West, I think Texas is going to be the team that ultimately wins the division. If you guys already watched a couple of our other videos, you saw Houston I had just missing that. As far as the wild card for Houston, I think they'll get the wild card there. I think they're a good enough team to where they'll snake one of those wild card spots, and that locks up all three wild cards. So at 87 wins, I have Detroit missing the postseason. I think that's how I see it. I think they're going to be this year's version of the Seattle Mariners, just missing the postseason. I think it's going to take more wins this year to make the postseason than what it did last year. I think we'll get at least a 100-win team out of the American League side this year. We did not have that last year. And I do think the Royals are going to win the division in the Central. So, in case you guys are trying to keep up with my logic here, Yankees win the East, Royals win the Central, Rangers win the West. I have the Red Sox winning a wild card spot, I have the Orioles winning a wild card spot, and the Astros winning a wild card spot. That means the Mariners, that means the Tigers, Twins, Rays, Blue Jays, all missed that final wild card spot on the American League side. So teams that did make the postseason last year that I have making it, Boston and Texas. Teams that I have dropping out, Cleveland and Detroit. I just like what the Royals did this offseason with the addition of Jonathan India and beefing up their bullpen. I like what they've done, and I think they have a really good chance to keep it going. Do they have a Tarek Skubal in their rotation? No. But I would say that they're a better overall team because they're not relying on so much young talent. They are relying on some, but not as much. I will say the Royals win the division. Would you put Tigers winning the AL Central if they sign Bregman? Absolutely. Now, of course, all of this can change at a drop of a hat. Say Detroit decides, hey, we're going all in on 2025. They trade for Kyle Tucker. They bring in Vladimir Guerrero. Obviously, that would change the equation there in the Central. But for right now, I think Detroit is going to be on the outside looking in. I think the loss in free agency of not getting Alex Bregman is ultimately going to cost them a playoff spot here. So hopefully they decide to hold on to Skubal and get an extension done. But a lot riding on this season when you think about Skubal and his pending free agency in a couple of years. All right, like I said, I have the Tigers improving their win total, but still missing the playoffs at 87 wins. I think it's probably going to take 87, 88 wins to get that final wild card spot. I think Houston is the team that is going to finish right at about the same record they did last year, around that 88 win total, maybe a little bit less. But for me, I'm going to say Detroit ultimately misses the postseason. Expectations for the roster, I'm expecting another good year from Colt Keith. I'm expecting Baez to be more of the same, not expecting much growth from him, but hopefully a message will be sent by that front office, basically limiting his playing time, and maybe that'll jog something for him, who knows. But he's not been a productive player for them. Gleyber Torres, I think, will help them offensively, but I think they needed to add another bat here to really push them over the top to at least get a wild card spot, maybe even win the division if they had brought in an Alex Bregman. Will they make any significant trades like a Tarek Skubal as far as selling? I don't think so unless they're significantly out at the All-Star break and it doesn't look like you're getting an extension done. That's the only way I see them moving on from a Skubal type player. They have a lot of young talent coming, but that doesn't mean they're going to get rid of their high-quality talent that they already have. As far as big trades like Tucker, Guerrero, etc., could they do it? I suppose. Will they? No. I think this is a team that's trying to keep that young talent together. Will they add around the periphery? Absolutely. Like that Varsho trade, I think is a possibility for them, or smaller trades of a similar type. Offseason grade, they didn't do anything horrible. Like I said, they didn't really, have a huge mistake this offseason. Their mistake was not bringing in Alex Bregman, and that's more of a miss to me. And so I can't be too hard on them. You're going to see a lot of B's when I do these evaluations because I do think there are other ways that they could have improved. You think Almagro is going to have a comeback year? He better hope so for Detroit's sake. I mean, he hasn't done much of anything since he signed that deal, and he's part of the reason, if not the entirety of the reason, why they didn't sign Alex Bregman because of the cautionary tale of Almagro there. But for the Tigers, I'm going to go ahead and give them a B. I'm just going to give them a solid B. I was contemplating a B minus just because they didn't do anything bigger like an Alex Bregman, but again, that's more of a miss than a mistake to me. And if they go out there this offseason or this coming offseason and spend money, then I can live with it. If they go another offseason without spending significant money to help this roster, then I'm going to have a bigger problem. Then their offseason grade's significantly lower than a B. But for just this offseason, I get it. They're having some young talent coming. They didn't want to commit themselves to a big contract. Maybe they have somebody in mind for next offseason. Maybe they want to get another year paid down on that Javi Baez deal. Maybe they just want to have some more at-bats available for their younger players that they're not expecting much out of. Maybe they surprise us and do better. But this is a roster that I think is able to compete in the AL Central, able to compete for a wild card, but just doesn't have it quite enough to get over the hump that I thought Alex Bregman really would have given them. So I give them a solid B for this offseason. Growth and surprises, again, it's going to be about that young talent on this roster. Can they get more out of Riley Green, Colt Keith, Chase Young, Job in the rotation? Can the players that you're not expecting much out of offensively, Perez, Rogers, and Sweeney, give you enough? Can they get some growth out of Javi Baez, get his head on right? All of these are, real possibilities for them, but they're going to have to earn it. They're going to have to earn every bit they get this year. They're going to have some struggles. They're going to go through some tough losing streaks. But they're also going to have their high highs. Like Tarek Skubal is one of the best pitchers in the game. You have some really good offensive talent in Green, Carpenter, Keith, and Young coming. And you have more talent coming in a year or so. It's just about, what free agent money they spend next offseason. For me, as far as, what the future of this team really holds. I think they're going to use this season a lot like the Cardinals are going to use this entire season for them, is figuring out what pieces are meant for them long term. And I think offensively, the Tigers are going to be doing something very similar. The pitching side, though, that's veteran heavy in the rotation. They should be just fine. The bullpen, though, leaves a little bit to be desired, and we'll see if they add somebody there. Ceiling for this team, let's say they surprise us and they make a trade at the deadline that really wows us and makes them win, say 92, 93 wins. I think that's probably the ceiling for this ball club. Could they win the division? I think that'd be the ceiling there. I do not think they make the ALCS even if they win the division and add some bats to this lineup. I don't think they get that far. But overall, I think they have a chance to get that far. As far as the floor for this ball club, 87 wins was my expectation. Say El Mago doesn't figure it out. The offense starts to sputter. They trade away a couple of pieces out of that rotation. Skubal has to be moved at the deadline because they don't think they'll keep him when he hits free agency. So they get as many future assets as they can. This thing could devolve into, say, like a 75, 78 win team and kind of tie the Minnesota Twins for fourth in this division. But I'd put the Tigers right behind the Royals as far as best teams there. I think the Guardians took a little bit of a step back this year. Based off of the loss of Naylor. Overall, I still think they're a good team. They'll be in it all the way through the end of September, I believe, and ultimately just fall just a little bit short of making the postseason. Ceiling again, win the division. Floor, 75, 78 wins, especially if they have to trade a Skubal in the middle of the season. This has been your 2025 season preview for the Detroit Tigers. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. We're about to do the Miami Marlins here in just a moment, so we'll be back in just a few minutes. But appreciate you guys joining us early on a Sunday morning. Thank you guys for joining us for the 2025 season preview for the Detroit Tigers, and we'll see you guys in just a moment.